Greetings everyone, this is Andres Potes. Today I'm going to be talking about English around the globe and translocal flows by José Aldemar Álvarez Valencia 2016. This is actually the first part of a book edited by our professor José Aldemar. Basically, the agenda for this presentation has 2 points. The first one is most relevant aspects from the text, and the second one, which comes at the end in the form of a diagram, is the connection between intercultural studies, language teaching and learning, and these relevant aspects that I'm going to present to you. The introduction of the text highlights that novel social and cultural dynamics can impact English teachers, learners, researchers, general population, and the nature and status of English. So, social and cultural dynamics can impact all of these actors, let's say. English is confronted by elements that underpin social interaction in ecological spaces where language is localized, delocalized, and relocalized, inflected by cultural repertoires, norms, values, and costumes. The environment, when they talk about ecological spaces, they talk about factors from the environment. Those factors can affect, confront, can influence language and the way it is acquired and the way communication flows, and this entails norms, values, and costumes. They talk about globalization. They say that globalization destabilizes the traditional concept of language. Blomer says this in 2010. A repertoire of semiotic resources that have mobility in space and time. That is how Blomer defines language. And this is opposite to the traditional static views that conceive language as a linguistic object belonging to spaces, peoples, and cultural practices. So it's more static, it's not dynamic at all. So Kress 2000 says there is a need to rethink how language has been conceptualized. And according to this view, and according to Blomer's conception of language, well, this text is going to address 3 different standpoints to conceptualize language. The first one is stated by Higgins 2009, and is concerned with the dichotomy in language. So Higgins sees language as a dichotomy. So there are 2 points in that dichotomy, of course. The first one views English as a hegemonic and imperialistic language that draws on its colonial history and political power to position itself as an oppressive force. So in this view, language is imposed, and language has oppressive or colonial objectives. So the issues that surround English in this view are power, misrecognition, social justice, empowerment, cultural and academic hegemony. The other view is the local one, which has to do with how English is appropriated by local communities by creative expression of cultural meanings through hybridization. So this is the first conceptualization of language. There are other forms. The second one is called transcultural flow by Pennycook 2007. He states that the way in which cultural forms move, change, and are reused to fashion new identities in diverse contexts. That's how he conceives language. So for him, semiotic production and identity performance through English are not strictly global or strictly local, as was stated by Higgins 2009. While Higgins was dividing language into 2 standpoints, Pennycook says no, cultural forms move, change, and are reused, but they are not divided in that dichotomy that was exposed by Higgins. The third one is called translocalization, and is the focus on this volume. This one was stated by Blomer 2010, and basically is defined as the process of mobility in which one form of locality is transported into another local system of meanings. For example, English language classroom in Brazil, or if we put it in our context, English language classroom in Colombia. There is translocalization there. For him, translocal means mobilization of meanings between localities, as opposed to globalization, which means the global in the local, which suggests a hierarchical relationship between the languages involved. This one, localization, is more related to the dichotomy exposed by Higgins. So Blomer proposes translocalization, which is a mobilization. It conceives language as a dynamic entity, let's say. The rest of the volume illustrates how stakeholders privilege any of the three views, and there are some examples of some studies. So on screen you're seeing one of Spanglish, in which translocal forms of meaning making importing from spatio-temporal scales involves socioeconomical status, gender, family position, immigrant generation, previous schooling, oral fluency, and literacy in the native language. So there is another one mentioned in the text by Brown. And this studies shows how the Taiwanese English learners represent the foreigner, and they represent it as based on race in language instead of centered on linguistic prestige. This one, to me, is related to the dichotomy and is related to the standpoint of the global in the dichotomy. So the foreigner phenotype in here is based on the white privilege and the status of the inner circle countries, right? It's kind of a stereotypical image of the foreigner. So they imagine a white man with a high status because that's the representation they have. And that's who counts as an English teacher and as a language model instead of someone who does not fit that image. The next part of the article addresses the approaches required in social, cultural, and semiotic bricolage. There is the need of a diverse methodological framework according to Krumara-Badibadu 2012 and McKay 2006, which provide a richer account of stories behind global ecological spaces. And this requires multifacetedness and interdisciplinarity of qualitative research approaches, which entail multimodal social semiotics, educational anthropology, general education, feminism, and the general field of applied linguistics. So basically what they say is that qualitative research approaches are better suited for studying language teaching and learning. And why qualitative? The next slide. Because in language learning and teaching, there is a multidimensionality of social, cultural, and historical issues that intertwine. Another reason is because it represents a set of interpretive material practices that make the world visible, as I was saying before. And this includes field notes, interviews, conversations, photographs, recordings, memos on the self. The last part of this article is a book overview, so you're seeing it on screen. I'm not gonna deepen on this. The last part of this presentation is focused on the connection between intercultural studies and English language teaching. So I draw this graph, kind of a cyclical graph, to show how all these things are connected. So first of all, communication, nature, something that is natural in humans. We need to communicate, not only using language, like the verbal language, but we need to communicate, and communication is acquired through multiplicity of modes, like diversity of resources, visual ones, physical ones, linguistic ones. We use signs, we use drawings, we use touch, we use body language, kinesthetics, all of those things to communicate. So it's something that is natural in us. Doesn't matter if we cannot see or cannot hear, we communicate through different resources, different modes. So this entails social interaction, multimodal factors, language, culture. Language equals culture, so language cannot be apart from culture. They go hand in hand. Culture entails worldviews, customs, beliefs, traditions, ideas, etc. Then language is not static. If it is part of human nature, it is dynamic. It is not only about linguistics. Language cannot be isolated from the context in the sense of when we talk about an ecological perspective, we need to embrace environmental affordances, you know. And I also agree that if we want to really understand the dynamics in language teaching and learning, qualitative research is the most appropriate approach to carry out studies because of the complexity of language and because language is deeply related to humans and humans are unpredictable. So in order to understand behaviors and some dynamics and the issues surrounding language learning and language acquisition and teaching, we need qualitative research. All right, so that was my presentation. Thank you very much. I look forward to reading your comments and I look forward to also commenting your videos. Thank you, Professor, also. Thanks to my partners. So I see you around in class, interacting on the web. Bye-bye.